Firstly, I say thank you for inviting me. It's a privilege to be here. I've been in cabaret venues that are less glamorous than this. And I start with a confession of a similar prejudice to that which Peter started with. I am a unionist. I would view it as a tragedy if the union broke up, or if it was badly damaged but hung together as well. But I go further than that. I actually think a phrase which would cause shock and horror in Germany, I think that the nation state is a moral concept, a representation of the will of the people and a group of people who have a loyalty to each other. And this is important, and for that reason it's important that the union we have feels like it's one nation and not several parts of one nation. I take issue with Peter when he said English votes for English laws, evil as it's nicely known, sort of sprang on the stage after the latest Scottish referendum. In my mind, at least, it exploded into being shortly after the first, not the first, but the first Scottish devolution settlement in the late 1990s. And partly it was my fault. I went to a Conservative Party conference that year and started talking about the rights of the English and whether we need an English Parliament and all these other ideas, and all of a sudden it just took over the whole conference. Conservative Party conferences for quite a while now have been predominantly English conferences, sadly, and it just gripped everybody's attention, to my surprise, and I think the surprise of all my colleagues. And it made, that of itself made a point which Peter just made, and that is that constitutions must feel fair. They must feel fair to everybody in them, and if they don't feel fair, then they become unstable. And so fairness and stability are two parts of the same coin. And I don't think any of the politicians who've really been responsible for this, from Gordon Brown and the Blair government onwards, have really given that the level of importance that it needs to have. And Nora made a similar sort of point when she talked about the trivial approach of modern politicians to this. And I'll tell you a parable. It's a true story, but it acts as a parable for this. When the settlement was made in the 1990s, in the late 1990s, I was Public Accounts Committee chairman. And so I was lucky enough to have lots and lots of government accountants who would carry out sums for me. And I thought, well, what if we actually decided to make the Scottish Parliament a real parliament? One that actually raised its own taxes and paid all its own bills. And so we did sums. And at the time, all of the powers being given to the Parliament would cost, from memory, I think £23 billion. And if we had given the Scots Parliament control over its income tax, its corporation tax, council tax, 85% of North Sea revenues, which was what my lawyers told me was the appropriate component, and one more thing. And I needed about another billion or so, and I reckon that a levy on, the current levy on whiskey would do that. And we sort of struck me as appropriate, really. They could have had a balanced set of accounts, no extra borrowings, no new taxes, no changes in old taxes, and they would have controlled their own destiny. And it would be very, very clear to the Scots nation that there wasn't some complicated Barnett formula. There wasn't some deal in which they were being denied the right amount of money, and the SNP couldn't go back every 5 minutes and say, the mean English are not giving you the money, so we can't build this new hospital or whatever. It would have been stable, financially stable, and one component of this perceived fairness is about money. If you talk to the English about the Scottish devolution, it's all about we are subsidising them. Whether it's 2 billion or 20 billion, that's what it's all about. And on the other side of the coin, the SNP try and make the argument the other way, of course. So that was what we came up with. And I went to see Gordon Brown, and I suggested this to him. I might have been talking to a wall. You know, he just said, oh, Parliament has decided. Parliament with 170 majority for his government, of course. So that was one thing. We did have a chance. We could have made it stable then, and it would have settled a lot of issues, which have been like a running sore ever since. Today, we are now talking about dealing with the outcome, the aftermath of the referendum. The most important aftermath of that referendum will be that it's going to come back in 5 or 10 years' time. I cannot believe that we will not have another referendum in short order, and it'll be almost unavoidable. And one of the markers of that is that Alex Salmond is coming back to London. He's standing as a Member of Parliament again, not a Member of the Scottish Parliament. He's only doing that for one reason. He doesn't have an impartial view on this. He wants independence for Scotland. Fair enough, that's his belief. But he's coming back to London in order to bring that about. And so what we have to think about is, can we, if we believe in the Union, or people like me who believe in the Union, can we create an entity today which seems to be fair on all sides? And where we're going at the moment with the latest proposals on English votes for English laws seems to me to be the worst of all worlds. Because we have a financial settlement which has still got the Barnett formula in it. And I'm moderately specialist in financial matters. I don't understand the Barnett formula. Joel Barnett, before he died a few months ago, said it was way out of date and should be got rid of. We could have had a new settlement which allowed it to be clear and straightforward, but no. And we've now added in welfare to the Scottish Parliament's responsibilities, which will create a whole new set of problems. So sorry to labour the practicalities, but it will be the practicalities that decide both the longevity of the government arrangements we have and the constitution that wraps around it. And secondarily, of course, that's where the political argument will be in the next referendum. So it seems to me that we've led ourselves into an incredibly difficult circumstance. That being said, it's not impossible, it's worth a fight, and I think that what we should be arguing now is both for the sorts of changes I talked about then for Scotland, but also on the other side, on the English votes for English laws, something which is clear-cut. And yet again, we're looking at a fudge. What Hague has proposed as his favoured option gives the amendment rights and some of the voting, some of the second and third reading voting to English members of Parliament, if it's an English issue, an English and Welsh issue, and so on. But then comes back to the overall United Kingdom Parliament again and said, but they've got to decide the final outcome. That's going to make, the moment there is a distinction between the decision of the English group in Parliament and the UK group in Parliament, you're going to have another schism, another chisel driven into the gap between the two countries. And that is disastrous. But the problem we have, and I don't have an answer to it, the problem we have is if we solve that problem properly, you're going to end up having to have an English health secretary and an English education secretary and even an English home secretary, because in each of those departments, all or the major part of the decisions are England only now. So we've set down a route where it's going to be incredibly difficult, not quite impossible, but incredibly difficult to come back to Peter's point, to have a settlement, a constitution, which seems fair and therefore is stable. It's a fight well worth having, because this country has got a genius which comes from its hybridity. You know, we have more power, more influence, more wealth, more reach, more innovation than any country of 60 million has a right to expect. And it comes from our diversity, not from our narrowness and smallness. And that's what we're about preserving. And it's something not just important to Britain, it's important to the world as a whole. Thank you.